Good day and welcome to CrowdHealing, a public educational program brought to you by the We Heal Foundation and KIYS Radio. Today's show is brought to you by the Aloha Health Network, finding the optimal treatment for every patient. I'm your host, Eric Drew. In today's segment, how to navigate a serious medical diagnosis, what you need to know to ensure you are getting the most advanced treatment possible.
We will discuss how the U.S. ranks in the world for medical outcomes, how important it is that the patients advocate for themselves, and how you as a patient can quickly network with the top doctors in the world and utilize existing free resources to find the optimal treatment for your specific case. The United States has 18 of the top 20 rated medical centers in the world and hosts approximately 80% of the world's new biotechnology. Yet the latest statistics put the U.S. 38th in the world, behind all other industrial advanced countries and behind many third world countries as well. This points to an obvious disconnect between what medical technologies and treatments exist in the U.S. and what the average patients are receiving. The United States has 18 of the top 20 rated medical centers in the world and hosts approximately 80% of the world's new biotechnology. Yet the latest statistics put the U.S. at 38th in the world, behind all other industrial advanced countries and behind many third world countries as well. This points to an obvious disconnect between what medical technologies and treatments exist in the U.S. and what treatments the average patients are getting. The Food and Drug Administration is now amending many of its out-of-date policies and implementing long overdue policies like the Right to Try law, but European countries continue to outpace the U.S. with implementing the latest and greatest medical technologies. The unfortunate reality is that conflicting agendas continue to interfere with transparency in medical options, and the agendas of insurance corporations, hospital administrations, global pharma companies, and even individual medical practices interfere with patients being offered a complete picture of their treatment options. Doctors simply don't have the time to research treatment options for each patient and discuss treatments that they do not do themselves. New breakthrough technologies are being announced daily, and doctors struggle to sort through all the noise and figure out what the optimal treatment plan is for each individual patient. The bottom line, it's up to us as patients to figure out what the optimal treatments are and to find the best doctors to do them. But how do we accomplish this daunting task without a medical background? How do patients that have no medical background get the information they need to advocate for themselves and make sure they are getting optimal treatment? Joining me today, please welcome Robert Winden, CEO and founder of the Aloha Health Network. And also welcome Dr. Singh, who serves as the Chief Medical Officer of multiple biotech companies, has worked at various medical centers, including Children's Hospital of Los Angeles, and leads the Medical Advisory Board for the We Heal Foundation.
It's a pleasure to be here, Eric. Thank you for having us.
Welcome. Welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me on. It's a wonderful.
Thank you, Rob. We're making an assumption today that there is an optimal treatment or combination of treatments for each individual patient. What that optimal treatment is rarely 100% clear, but the closer we can get to identifying what an optimal treatment is for a patient, the closer we'll get to saving the tens of thousands of lives who are not receiving the ideal treatment for their particular case. Dr. Singh, being a physician yourself, please describe some of the difficulties that doctors face when trying to advocate for their patients and prescribe the optimal treatment for a specific diagnosis.
Well, that's a great question, Eric. From my personal practice and experience, I found that physicians are often handcuffed by insurers in the treatment protocols, which can be given to patients, just because those have been sanctioned by physicians and they have relationships with pharma companies underlying those. But that means that late cutting edge treatments are often not under the ambit of those. So patients have to struggle, especially cancer folks, to find the latest biologic and navigate the insurance world to see that the insurer will pay for it.
So it's really
but often it's institution centric, and so the hospital has not rolled it out at that point of time. And so the treatment protocols are a little outdated and not as efficacious as the newer ones.
Right,
And
right. So in a sense, there's a lag between new technologies that are coming out, every day, and then the payers and insurances that have to go through the process of approving all this stuff. So if a treatment is not approved or generally approved or considered standard of care, then they simply won't mention it to the patient because they don't feel that the patient will be able to receive it anyway, right? So that's a big problem.
that's absolutely correct. And I mean, that's a systemic inefficiency which has crept in due to the bureaucracy, in a sense, of these behemoth insurance companies, which are often slow to move for avant-garde treatments, much to the detriment of patients across the
Yeah,
states and often worldwide as well.
of course, of
So,
course.
there's a lot of scope for improvement on that front.
There's
Uh,
also, logistical limitations. I mean, if a doctor can't offer this treatment and, maybe they're in an isolated area or something like that, then why mention it to a patient? I mean, I really don't, as a doctor, I really don't know too much about that new technology that has come out, and I can't offer that myself. So really, I'm limited to telling patients only what I can offer here at my practice.
Yes, yes. And having undergone medical school, it takes a ton of years and a lot of white hair to understand the logic and the rationale behind medical terms. But patients obviously have not undergone that. So they don't, there's a lot of technicality which clouds and shrouds often the information available online, including on clinicaltrials.gov,
Sure.
which is not easy to understand for a layperson. Uh, so there's a ton of room for improvement, especially for disseminating information in a way, shape, and form which is easily digestible by the patient.
By the average
Um,
person. Yes, I get
so,
it. Yep. Now
um,
we're not going to even talk about, obviously there's financial incentives and there's, pharmaceutical companies that offer incentives to medical centers and practices for offering their drug as opposed to another drug, or this protocol as opposed to another one. So all these agendas at play here really do conflict potentially with what is best for that patient. And it's very clear.
it's and my particular bugbear is that treatment protocols can be institution centric, right?
Mhm.
What has historically been done since dinosaurs have roamed the earth is often what happens in 2019 as we speak. Uh, and so just because it's like a Titanic and it's very hard to change course, but patients don't have that luxury of time,
No.
right? Often, if it's a terminal stage diagnosis, they're looking at months of survival. And if they can't get access to the latest monoclonal antibody or biologic, then they lapse. And so there's, I mean, there patient advocacy platforms, I feel like WeHeal are incredible in disseminating information from firsthand accounts of patients who have undergone those protocols and I've worked for them. So in terms of educating other patients as to the best modality of therapy for their particular pathology, besides, of course, the agenda for today, which is room for Aloha, private party clinical trials database, which can really prove a viable alternative to clinicaltrials.com, but hopefully in easier to understand language, which 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 patients can use as a very convenient tool to access the latest clinical trials, cutting edge therapies for their pathology.
Thank you. Thank you.
And
So, regarding Aloha, before we start talking about solutions, we've really identified the problem here, and that's that patients are struggling. They're not getting the optimal treatments for themselves. So let's start talking about solutions. But before as the VP of engineering for a very successful software company that managed clinical trials and clinical trial management, what inspired you to start the Aloha Health Network and approach things from the patient's perspective?
Thank you, Eric. What I've noticed for a long time is that there isn't anyone representing the interests of the patient. I mean, doctors take an oath that they take seriously, that they will represent the interests of the patient, but doctors work within a clinical setting. And in the post-hospitalist world, where a lot of physicians are working as part of these large health systems, The clinics can dictate the choice. They dictate their own perspective in terms of what financial arrangements clinical systems have. Biotechs, of course, are representing themselves and the drugs that they want to sell and develop. Everybody kind of has a different perspective. No one's actually, in a robust way, representing the interests of the patient.
All these agendas that we mentioned, yes.
And that's what really drove me to start this project.
Thank you. No, it's an amazing technology, and let's talk about it a little bit. So, as a patient, I'm diagnosed with this terrible disease, potentially a life-threatening cancer. Let's just say, for example, but any serious or terminal illness. Why? What does this do? I mean, essentially, patients don't have a medical background. They don't know what to do. Looking on the internet is full of noise. There are, as we'll get into, there are a lot of real free services, foundations out there that will do this research and help patients locate the optimal treatment for their certain situations. WeHeal.org, obviously, Cancer Commons, the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society does great work doing clinical trial research for patients. If you happen to have a blood or bone marrow cancer. So how does Aloha technology fit into this, and what critical piece are you providing?
In recent years, there's just been an explosion of investment into biotechnology nationally. And the problem is that it's generated a huge number of recruiting trials. Mm-hmm. We ran an analysis recently that showed as many as 50,000 trials recruiting. And internationally, the number is even larger.
50,000 trials. That's globally that are registered in 1 year?
And they're not all registered on one service.
Okay.
You won't find them all on clinicaltrials.gov, for example. And some of them are even private. They're not even publicly disclosed.
Correct, yeah.
So it's very difficult for anybody to get their hands around this. Also, the information that's on these registries, in addition to being only partial coverage of what the trial is about, is they're incredibly technical, as Dr. Singh was saying, and difficult to ascertain, even for medical professionals at this point, just because of the sheer volume of them.
Absolutely.
So a system that can automatically help sort through that information and match patients to optimal treatment can really help nonprofit organizations like your own WeHeal match people to treatments more effectively and faster. And time is of the essence for someone who's really sick. So.
Oh, that's fantastic. I mean, Dr. Singh, in this era of, as we talked about, rapidly expanding technologies and diverse treatment options, I mean, how important is it that physicians encourage their patients to use free services like WeHeal, like Aloha, and the others that we mentioned, and encourage patients to examine all their treatment options and do this research for themselves? I mean, I think this is a critical piece because patients go to their physicians to get this information. So, really that's the conduit that patients they're looking to their physicians for guidance. So.
Yes. And the conduit for patients is that there is a disruptive innovator in the clinical trials database space who's facilitating access to the latest and greatest trials, stripped away from jargon, say biomarkers and barriers to entry for a clinical trial. And someone is able to list out the most cutting edge trial, maybe a week or in a month of it being put out by the pharma company, for example. Mm-hmm. Like it would be personally great to see some CAR-T chimeric antigen receptor T therapies in the oncology space being listed out on Aloha. So there is a lot of room for a nimble, agile startup to provide patients data which behemoths like clinicaltrials.gov are not able to as quickly provide.
Excellent, thank you. Yeah, I mean, for a patient, I'm going to try to translate that for the average listener. So, Dr. Singh, I think what you were saying is that patients, it really it's in the patient's lap to spearhead and make those decisions and really look at all his options and bring those options, bring the results of all these free resources and research to their physicians and inquire with their physicians to them. Correct? So
Yes,
They
yes.
need
No,
tools. They
not,
need
I
help.
mean, the cliche is true, but knowledge is power. I mean, at its best. And there is a huge vacuum for a portal which simplifies a jargon and in a very basic English makes that trial very readable to the layperson and get them excited about that light at the end of the tunnel, so to speak, uh, which uh, which I personally have browsed through clinicaltrials.gov, and it can get very technical. And I I don't. I mean, people will be pulling their hair out trying to read at the same time.
Absolutely. Again, the bottom line is patients need help, and we're here to let them know that there are free resources out there. Non doesn't cost a penny. And literally, these resources will find and locate the most advanced treatments and trials for their disease. I mean, that's what it's all about, right? So, again, is there anything else that you'd like to tell us about Aloha? I mean, I think that obviously any patients that want to order the Aloha consult, they can go to weheal.org and right on the home page that says "Get your free treatment and clinical trial search," and that's essentially the Aloha tool.
Yeah.
So, is there anything else that you want to let consumers know about the process or what they can expect when they?
Sure. Yeah, patients will visit your site. They'll be forwarded over to the Aloha system, which is co-branded with your site and those of our nonprofit and health system partners. And the patient logs in. They provide patient consent. We then pull the medical record of the patient, and we have an artificial intelligence program that then automatically matches the health history of that patient to available treatments. Then displays an easy to understand list of what those treatments are, sorted by their relevance to the patient. And then that then allows the patient to request further information on one or multiple of those treatments, and then starts the process of carrying them through that until eventually they're placed.
Very simple, very simple, and obviously they can ask questions or get guidance along the way. So very, very simple from either WeHeal staff or from Aloha staff. So one thing I think is really important for consumers to know is that when they're doing a treatment and clinical trial search for whatever the diagnosis might be, and like I said, it doesn't have to be cancer. It could be arthritis or, you name it. I mean, if you're looking for the most advanced technologies that are being tested for your disease and you want the latest treatments available, this is a way to do it. And along the way, as they're looking at this, it still might be a little bit technical for them. They still might not really know or have a background in how they would strategize as to what treatment's better than another, or how the decision-making process. So they can invite, the Aloha system does allow them to invite a core group of people in a very secure private setting to review the same information with them, make comments, chat in essence about these things. And they can invite their doctor, they can invite, a family member who's a medical, health professional, and get the support and information they need. So, this is very exciting because I tell you, when I was diagnosed with acute leukemia 15 years ago, and essentially spent 2 years doing trials that really never had any chance of helping me, and then was essentially sent home to die with no options. A service like this WeHeal service and the tool like Aloha provides, I would have saved me 2 years of hell. And I probably wouldn't have, suffered the damage and everything else that I did because of all those treatments. So, thank you very much. I mean, this is really very exciting.
Rob wouldn't want to toot his own horn, but what I personally loved about Aloha, and maybe let me know your thoughts on this, Eric, was that Aloha strips away identifiers from the patient's history and records, so that it prophesizes to be supremely HIPAA compliant. Right. So Eric,
very secure and private. Yes.
You famously suffered ID theft at the hospital where you were undergoing oncology treatment, to your detriment, that you were lying in bed and banks were hounding you. Right. Which was nasty.
That's a whole other story. But yes, that is true.
That Aloha with the HIPAA compliance, I think would be fantastic for patient populations so that they can safely entrust their medical records to Aloha and not suffer.
Absolutely. That's a good point. I mean, real quick before we finish up, from what I understand, what you told me offline, Rob, was that Aloha doesn't keep your medical records in their system. It just looks through their medical records for the key data points it needs, and then expunges the record. So it is very, very private and secure, and patients can feel comfortable knowing that their information is thus so secure and private.
Yeah, you're both correct. The system places an utmost importance on HIPAA compliance and GDPR compliance. The data is always under the patient's control, and we only access it temporarily for the match, and then we actually expunge it.
Okay, great. So for all of you out there, please, if you're suffering from any type of serious or terminal diagnosis, it's a free service to you. You can go to weheal.org and order this service, and help you find the most advanced treatments available for your disease. So thank you very much. Thank you for joining us on CrowdHealing, and please look forward to our next segment.